When a struggling single father agrees to marry a 69-year-old oil heiress to save his failing ranch, he thinks it's just a marriage of convenience. Little does he know, she's been secretly supporting his family for years through anonymous donations. From paying his daughter's medical bills to keeping his ranch afloat, Eleanor Blackwood has been his guardian angel all along. But why would a wealthy heiress spend years protecting a cowboy she'd never met? What made her choose this family to watch over? Jake Harrison's weathered hands trembled as he spread the bills across his kitchen table, the morning sun casting long shadows over final notices and urgent payment demands. 8 generations of Harrisons had worked this land, but he might be the last. The thought settled in his chest like a lead weight. His gaze drifted to the refrigerator where Sarah's latest drawing hung, a bright yellow sun beaming down on stick figures of them both, standing beside what was supposed to be their barn. His 12-year-old daughter had inherited her mother's artistic touch, even if the medication sometimes made her hands shake too much to hold a crayon steady. The medical bills were the worst. Insurance covered some of Sarah's treatments, but the experimental procedures the doctors recommended weren't included. $30,000 might as well have been $3 million for all he could manage. Outside, the rhythmic creak of the old windmill carried on the morning breeze, a sound that had lulled him to sleep every night of his life. Third-generation equipment limped along, held together with baling wire and prayer. The drought hadn't helped. 3 years of barely enough rain to keep the grass growing, let alone support a proper herd. He shuffled through the papers again, hoping the numbers might somehow change. The bank's letter was clear enough. Final notice. Payment in full required within 30 days. They'd been patient, he had to give them that. Most banks would have foreclosed months ago. A soft knock at the screen door startled him. "Daddy, can I come down for breakfast?" Jake quickly gathered the bills into a pile, stuffing them into an already overstuffed folder. "Sure thing, Princess. Watch that third step. It's still loose." Sarah made her way carefully down the stairs, her slight frame moving with the deliberate caution he'd grown too used to seeing. At 12, she should have been running and jumping, not measuring each step like an old woman. The thought twisted something in his gut. "I made coffee," he said, forcing cheerfulness into his voice. "And we've got some of those strawberry Pop-Tarts. You like the ones Mrs. Martinez gave us?" Sarah's face lit up. Their elderly neighbor had taken to dropping off groceries occasionally, claiming she bought too much again. Jake suspected she knew more about their situation than she let on. As Sarah settled at the table, Jake caught sight of the morning paper he hadn't bothered to read yet. Something on the back page caught his eye. An advertisement in a black border, more formal-looking than the usual classifieds, seeking ranch manager partner, must have extensive agricultural experience. Unique opportunity for the right candidate. Discretion essential. Generous compensation. Inquire at Blackwood Enterprises, Suite 1200 downtown. He'd heard of Blackwood Enterprises. Everyone in 3 counties had. Old money, oil money, the kind of wealth that could buy and sell operations like his 100 times over without blinking. "Daddy, are you okay?" Jake realized he'd been staring at the paper. Sarah was watching him with that too-old look in her eyes, the one that said she understood more than any 12-year-old should have to. "Just fine, sweetheart. Just thinking. About some business stuff?" He managed a smile. "How about those Pop-Tarts?" But as he prepared their modest breakfast, his eyes kept drifting back to the advertisement. Ranch manager, partner, generous compensation. The words seemed to float off the page, offering something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. He'd tried. Everything else. Loans, second mortgages, even selling off parcels of land piece by piece. But it wasn't enough. Not with Sarah's medical bills. Not with the equipment failing, not with the drought squeezing what little profit margin remained. The ad could be nothing, probably was nothing. But as he watched Sarah carefully break her Pop-Tart into small, manageable pieces, a habit she'd developed when the tremors were bad, Jake knew he was out of options. He'd make the call. What did he have left to lose? The Blackwood Enterprises. Buildings stretched toward the clouds, all gleaming glass and steel that made Jake's scuffed boots and best pearl snap shirt feel woefully out of place. The receptionist's raised eyebrow when he gave his name said as much, but a moment later her demeanor shifted completely. "Mr. Harrison, Ms. Blackwood is expecting you. 18th floor." The elevator ride gave him too much time to think. What kind of ranch manager position required an office in a place like this? Something didn't add up, but desperation had a way of quieting doubts. Eleanor Blackwood's office was smaller than he'd expected, though no less intimidating. Dark wood paneling and floor-to-ceiling windows framed a woman who defied easy categorization. She was older, late 60s at least, but her posture was straight as a fence post, her silver hair expertly styled. Sharp blue eyes assessed him from behind a massive oak desk. "Mr. Harrison, please, sit." Her voice carried the refinement of old money, but there was something else there, a hint of familiar practicality that reminded him of his grandmother. "Thank you for seeing me, Ms. Blackwood, about the ranch manager position. Let's not waste each other's time with pretense." She folded her hands on the desk. "I've reviewed your situation thoroughly. The Harrison Ranch, 8 generations, currently operating at a loss. Equipment well past its useful life, considerable medical expenses for your daughter Sarah's condition." Jake stiffened. "I didn't include any of that in my application." "No, you didn't." A slight smile touched her lips. "I make it my business to know things, Mr. Harrison. It's how I've survived in this industry." She stood, moving to the window. "Your ranch sits on the aquifer that feeds my most productive oil fields. I've watched 3 neighboring properties sell out to developers. I don't intend to let that happen to yours." "Ma'am, with all due respect, I'm not selling." "Good," she turned back to him, "because I'm not interested in buying. I'm interested in a partnership of a more personal nature." Jake's confusion must have shown on his face because she continued, her tone matter-of-fact. "I'm proposing marriage, Mr. Harrison." He nearly knocked over his chair, standing up. "I beg your pardon? Please sit. Hear me out." She returned to her desk, pulling out a folder. "I need a partner who understands ranching, someone who can maintain the agricultural character of the property while I focus on my energy interests. You need capital investment and stability. It's a practical solution." "Ma'am, you can't be serious." "Entirely serious. The arrangement would be mutually beneficial. Your daughter would have access to the best medical care. The ranch would receive necessary upgrades. You would retain operational control with the benefit of my resources." Jake's mind spun. This had to be some kind of joke, or worse, a trap. "Why me?" Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "Because you're the only one who's refused to sell. Because you understand what legacy means. And because I've lived long. Enough to recognize integrity when I see it." She slid a business card across the desk. Heavy cream cardstock, gold embossed with the Blackwood logo. "Take a day to think it over. My private number is on the back." "But Mr. Harrison," her gaze held his. "Don't take too long. Some opportunities only come once." Jake walked out of that office, feeling like he'd stepped into some alternate reality. The card seemed to burn in his pocket, its gold lettering catching the sun as he stepped onto the street. A marriage of convenience to a woman old enough to be his mother. It was insane, absolutely insane. But as he climbed into his aging truck, the engine protesting as it turned over, he thought of Sarah, of the ranch, of 8 generations of Harrisons who'd worked that land. Sometimes crazy ideas were the only ones left. He pulled out the card, studying the elegant script. Eleanor Blackwood, oil baroness, potential wife. The thought should have made him laugh. Instead, it filled him with a strange mix of hope and trepidation. What kind of woman proposed marriage like a business deal? And why couldn't he shake the feeling that there was more to her offer than she was letting on? Jake sat in his truck outside Sarah's doctor's office, staring at the latest test results. Words jumped out at him. Progressive deterioration, experimental treatment options, significant improvement possible with early intervention. But the number at the bottom of the page spoke loudest, $175,000. He pulled Eleanor's business card from his wallet, where it had lived for the past 3 days. The gold lettering caught the afternoon sun, almost winking at him. 3 days of sleepless nights, of turning her proposal over and over in his mind. 3 days of watching Sarah try to hide her tremors, of pretending not to notice when she stumbled. The drive home was quiet, Sarah dozing in the passenger seat. She looked so small, curled up against the window, so young, too young to carry. The burden of an illness that kept getting worse instead of better. "Hey, Princess," he said softly, as they pulled up to the ranch. "Think we could have a talk before dinner?" Sarah's eyes opened, that too-old wisdom in them again. "Is it about the bills, Daddy?" His heart clenched. "Sort of, but it's more than that." He helped her down from the truck, and they walked to their favorite spot, the old porch swing that had survived 3 generations of Harrisons. The evening was settling in, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. A cool breeze carried the scent of sage and distant rain. Jake took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "You remember when Mom got sick," he started. "How she told us sometimes the bravest thing we can do is ask for help." Sarah nodded, her small hand finding his. "Like how Mrs. Martinez brings us groceries." "Something like that." He squeezed her hand gently. "Someone's offered to help us, sweetheart, in a big way. But it would mean some changes around here." "What kind of changes?" Jake watched a hawk circle lazily overhead. "You know Blackwood Enterprises, the big oil company?" At her nod, he continued. "Well, Ms. Blackwood, Eleanor, she's offered to help us save the ranch, to make sure you can get all the treatment you need." Sarah's brow furrowed. "What does she want?" "Smart girl, just like her mother. She wants to marry me." The words hung in the evening air. Sarah's hand tightened in his. "But she's old," Sarah said finally. "Like Grandma old." Despite everything, Jake chuckled. "Yes, she is. It wouldn't be like when Mom was here. It would be more like a partnership to help both of us." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing. The swing creaked softly beneath them. "Would we have to leave the ranch?" "No, baby. We'd stay right here, but we'd have money for repairs, for new equipment, for your treatments." Would she live here with us?" "Eventually, yes. But nothing would happen without your—" "Okay, Princess. You're my priority. Always have been, always will be." Sarah leaned against him, her slight frame warm against his side. "Is she nice?" Jake thought about Eleanor's direct gaze, the hint of softness beneath her businesslike exterior. "I think she is, in her own way. She's different from Mom, but I think she has a good heart." "Mom would want us to be okay," Sarah said quietly. "She wouldn't want you to be sad and worried all the time." Tears pricked at Jake's eyes. When had his little girl grown so wise? "I'm thinking about saying yes," he admitted, "but only if you're sure you're okay with it." Sarah was quiet again, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the fields gold. Finally, she looked up at him. "Can I meet her first?" Relief and love flooded through him. "Of course you can, Princess. That's a real good idea." They sat together. As darkness crept in, the old swing creaking its familiar song, Jake pulled out his phone and Eleanor's card, his finger hovering over the keypad. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart." "If she makes you sad, can we change our minds?" He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "We're a team, you and me. Nothing's going to change that." "I promise." Sarah nodded, satisfied. "Then I think you should call her." Jake looked at his daughter, so brave, so understanding, so much like her mother, and dialed the number. As it rang, he sent up a silent prayer, hoping he was making the right choice. "Eleanor Blackwood speaking." Jake took a deep breath, feeling Sarah's hand squeeze his. "Ms. Blackwood, it's Jake Harrison. About your proposal, I'd like to discuss it further, but first, I'd like you to meet someone very important to me. Eleanor's private dining room at the Grand Hotel was bigger than Jake's entire kitchen. Sarah sat beside him, wearing her Sunday best, her legs swinging slightly under the table as she studied the elaborate place settings with wide eyes. Eleanor arrived precisely on time, her silver hair catching the crystal chandelier light. But it wasn't her elegant appearance that surprised Jake. It was how she immediately focused on Sarah, her businesslike demeanor softening into something genuine. "You must be Sarah," Eleanor said, taking a seat across from them. "I understand. You're quite the artist. Your father mentioned the drawings on your refrigerator." Sarah brightened. "Do you like to draw too?" "I used to. These days I mostly collect art. Perhaps you'd like to see my gallery sometime." Jake watched their interaction carefully. Eleanor spoke to Sarah not with condescension but with respect, the same way she'd spoken to him in her office. When their lunch arrived, she noticed Sarah struggling with her fork and smoothly switched to finger foods herself, removing any embarrassment from the situation. After dessert, Eleanor's assistant appeared to show Sarah the hotel's rooftop garden, leaving the adults to discuss business. The shift in Eleanor's demeanor was subtle but immediate. "She's a remarkable child," Eleanor said, pulling out a leather portfolio. "Now, shall we discuss terms?" The contract was thick, printed on heavy paper. Jake's lawyer, arranged and paid for by Eleanor to ensure he had proper representation, began walking them through the details. "The ranch remains in Heiress Family Trust," the lawyer explained. "Ms. Blackwood will establish a separate medical trust for Sarah's care, with full access to her team of specialists at Mayo Clinic." Jake's throat tightened. Mayo Clinic had been a pipe dream until now. Eleanor added, "I'll also be transferring operation rights for the mineral deposits under the ranch to the trust. The oil revenue alone should secure Sarah's future education." That's too much," Jake protested. "It's practical," Eleanor countered. "A marriage should benefit both parties and their dependents. I'm not interested in half measures, Mr. Harrison." The lawyers continued through equipment upgrades, renovation allowances, and staff hiring. Each item addressed a need Jake had been struggling with, thought through with meticulous care. "There is one additional clause," Eleanor said as they neared the end. "I would like the option to legally adopt Sarah should she be agreeable after a suitable period of adjustment." Jake stared at her. "Adopt?" "For inheritance purposes primarily," Eleanor explained, but something in her eyes suggested more. "The Blackwood legacy should pass to someone who understands the value of the land. Sarah has that understanding in her blood." Before Jake could respond, they heard Sarah's laugh floating in from the garden. Eleanor's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "We don't have to decide that now," she said, "but I want you both to know that this isn't just a business arrangement to me. I'm proposing to create a family, unconventional as it may be." Jake studied her face, searching for any sign of deception. He found none. "One last thing," Eleanor said, pulling out a small box. Inside was a simple gold band. "For appearance's sake, we should do this properly." She held out the ring but didn't move to place it on his finger, letting him choose. Jake thought of Sarah's medical bills, of the ranch's needs, of 8 generations of Harrisons. But mostly he thought of Sarah's laugh in the garden, and how Eleanor had noticed his daughter's struggles and quietly accommodated them without drawing attention. He held out his hand. The ring was warm from being in the box, its weight unfamiliar, but not uncomfortable. Inside, he noticed an engraving, "Legacy lives in love." "I had it made last week," Eleanor said quietly. "Too presumptuous?" Jake looked at the ring, then at this surprising woman who offered salvation wrapped in gold and legal terms, yet took the time to make his daughter smile. "No," he said finally, "not presumptuous, just unexpected, like all of this." Eleanor's smile held a hint of something, satisfaction, relief, as she gathered the contracts. I find the unexpected often leads to the most worthwhile outcomes, Mr. Harrison. Jake, he corrected. If we're doing this, you should call me Jake. Jake, she agreed. And for a moment, he caught a glimpse of the woman behind the business. Empire, someone who perhaps was taking her own leap of faith. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wedding was a quiet affair at the county courthouse, with Sarah as their only witness. Eleanor wore a tailored cream suit, Jake his best black shirt and boots. No photographers, no announcements, just signatures on papers and simple vows, exchanged under fluorescent lights. What surprised Jake most was Eleanor's insistence on moving into the ranch house rather than suggesting they relocate to her mansion in the city. The ranch house has character, she'd said, surveying the worn, hardwood floors and faded wallpaper. It just needs some attention, like everything else around here. Within a week, crews arrived to repair the roof, update the plumbing, and modernize the kitchen. Eleanor supervised with surprising expertise, ensuring the renovations preserved the home's historic charm while adding modern conveniences. Sarah's room was transformed into something from a magazine, though Eleanor had insisted on keeping the girls' hand-drawn artwork as the centerpiece of the decor. The best art comes from the heart, she'd told Sarah, helping her arrange the pictures in proper frames. They settled into an unexpected rhythm. Eleanor rose early, reviewing oil company reports at the kitchen table while Jake handled the morning ranch work. She'd have coffee waiting when he came in, strong and black, just the way he liked it. The Anderson property is for sale, she mentioned one morning, sliding a file across the table. Their north pasture would give us better access to the creek. Jake studied the papers, noting her use of us rather than you or I. Good grazing land, he admitted, but the price is reasonable for the long-term benefit. She sipped her tea, never coffee for her. Sarah's physical therapy starts next week. The new clinic is only 40 minutes away. The casual way she wove ranch business and family matters together still caught him off guard, as did finding her in the barn one afternoon, examining the ancient tractor with a critical eye. My father started in machinery repair, she explained, running a knowing hand along the engine block. I spent my childhood handing him wrenches before I ever saw an oil derrick. Later that night, Jake found a manual for a new model tractor on his pillow. Not a replacement, but a restoration guide for their existing one. Eleanor understood the value of history, even in machinery. They slept in separate rooms, as agreed. But they shared meals, decisions, and gradually stories. Eleanor spoke of her father's rise from mechanic to oil baron, of learning the business from the ground up. Jake found himself sharing tales of ranch life, of Sarah's mother, of his hopes for his daughter's future. Sarah bloomed under Eleanor's quiet attention. They spent evenings in the study, Eleanor teaching her about art and business in equal measure. Never too early to understand both beauty and value, she'd say, helping Sarah hold a paintbrush with trembling fingers. The ranch hands adapted quickly to Eleanor's presence, especially after she demonstrated her knowledge of cattle breeds and grazing rotation. Miss Eleanor knows her stuff, old Pete had commented, impressed by her suggestion for improving the irrigation system. Only at night, when the house was quiet, did Jake sometimes wonder about the strange turn his life had taken. He'd catch Eleanor in unguarded moments, watching Sarah with a wistful smile or standing on the porch studying the stars, and sense there was more to her story than she'd revealed. One evening, helping Sarah into bed, his daughter asked the question that had been lingering in his mind. "Daddy, how did Eleanor know so much about our ranch before she married you?" Jake paused in the act of tucking her in. "What do you mean, princess?" "She knew about the loose step and my favorite breakfast, and even which medicines make me shakiest." Sarah yawned. "It's like she was watching over us for a long time." Jake kissed her forehead, mind turning over his daughter's observation. "Get some sleep, sweetheart. Standing in the hallway, he noticed Eleanor's study lights still on. Through the half-open door, he caught a glimpse of her at her desk, looking at what appeared to be old photographs. The mystery of Eleanor Blackwood, he realized, was only beginning to unfold. Life settled into patterns, like the shifting shadows across the ranch house porch. Eleanor integrated herself into their world with an ease that sometimes made Jake forget how recently she'd arrived. She moved through their home, as if she'd always known its rhythms, anticipating creaky floorboards and dodging the spots where the spring rain leaked through before repairs. The ranch schedule appeared one morning, typed and laminated, posted, near the coffee maker. Jake started to explain they'd always kept times in their heads, but stopped when he saw how Eleanor had arranged it. Medicines marked in Sarah's favorite purple ink, ranch tasks in practical black, shared meals highlighted in warm yellow. "I hope you don't mind," Eleanor said, catching him studying it. "I find comfort in organization." But it was more than that. She'd somehow known exactly when the cattle needed rotating, when the hay delivery usually arrived. Even old Pete's preferred lunch break timing. Sarah's health improved steadily under the new treatment plan. The tremors decreased, her energy returned, and her artwork grew more confident. Eleanor had converted the sunroom into an art studio, complete with an easel modified to stabilize, when Sarah's hands weren't steady. "How did you know about the weighted brushes?" Jake asked one evening, watching Sarah paint with tools he'd never seen before. "Research," Eleanor replied smoothly, but her eyes held that familiar guardedness. "One develops resources over the years." The mystery deepened when Jake discovered Eleanor's old photo albums in the study. Most showed her rise through the oil. A business, but one weathered book caught his attention. Before he could open it, Eleanor appeared. "Family history," she said, taking it carefully. "Nothing interesting, I'm afraid." But Jake had glimpsed a familiar landscape in one photo, the view from his own ranch, decades ago. The ranch hands noticed things too. "Funny how Miss Eleanor knew about that old well out by the north fence," Pete mentioned during fence repairs. "That ain't been on any map since your granddaddy's time." Eleanor's knowledge extended beyond the ranch. She asked about Sarah's favorite teacher, Mrs. Collins, mentioning the woman's reputation for helping students with special needs. She knew the best times to visit Dr. Thompson in town, when his waiting room was emptiest. One morning, Jake found her in the barn, running her hand along a wooden beam near the back wall. Her fingers traced old initials carved there, J.H. and M.B., his parents' marks from their courting days. "James Harrison and Mary Beth," Eleanor said softly, not turning around. "They carved this the summer before they were married." Jake's throat tightened. "How did you—" "Oh, the hands mentioned it," she said quickly. But Pete later swore none of them had known that story. Sarah's questions continued, innocent but piercing. "Eleanor, how come you have a picture of Daddy when he was little?" Jake's head snapped up from his coffee. "What picture?" "In her wallet," Sarah said. "I saw it when she was getting money for ice cream. Daddy's sitting on Old Red, that pony. In the stories Grandpa used to tell." Eleanor smoothly changed the subject, but Jake caught the flash of something in her eyes. Worry? Guilt. Before her usual composed expression returned, the incidents piled up like autumn leaves. Eleanor humming his mother's favorite hymn while cooking. Her knowledge of which kitchen drawer held the ancient cookie recipe his grandmother had never written down. The way she automatically avoided the patch of floor that creaked outside Sarah's room during afternoon naps. Then came the morning Jake found her early medical bills in Eleanor's study. Not the recent ones, but records from Sarah's first diagnosis 3 years ago. Papers that should have been locked in his desk drawer were spread across her workspace, covered in notes in Eleanor's elegant handwriting. "Looking for something?" Eleanor's voice came from the doorway, startling him. "An explanation," Jake said quietly, holding up the papers. "These are private records. From years ago." Eleanor's face showed a flicker of resignation. "I suppose we need to talk. About how you've been watching us. About why you know things nobody could know." Jake's voice rose slightly. "About why? My daughter's medical bills from 3 years ago have your handwriting on them. A long moment passed. Eleanor straightened her shoulders, every inch the businesswoman despite her casual ranch clothes. "Yes," she said finally, "about all of that. But Jake," her voice softened, "you might want to sit down for this one." That conversation never happened. Eleanor was called away for an urgent business meeting in Houston, leaving Jake alone with his questions and a stack of suspicious documents. The timing felt too convenient, but it gave him space to dig deeper. He started with the medical bills. Pulling out his own copies from the locked drawer, he laid them side by side with Eleanor's versions. Her notes were meticulous. Treatment options highlighted, experimental procedures circled, doctors' names underlined with small stars beside certain ones. "Dr. Matthews, leading specialist in pediatric tremors," one note read. The same doctor. Sarah was seeing now, the one Eleanor had recommended 2 weeks into their marriage. Jake pulled out his laptop, another of Eleanor's additions to the house, and began searching. Dr. Matthews had received a substantial research grant. 3 years ago, right when Sarah's symptoms first appeared, the donor, a small foundation he'd never heard of, the MB Legacy Trust, MB, his mother's initials. The discovery sent him to the barn, to that beam with his parents' carved initials. He ran his fingers over the worn grooves of JH and MB, remembering Eleanor's knowledge of their story. On a hunch, he checked the date she'd mentioned, the summer before they married. His father's journal, tucked away in the ranch office, confirmed it. But as he flipped through the pages, a newspaper clipping fell out. His parents' wedding announcement, and there in the background of the grainy photo, barely noticeable, a young woman who looked remarkably like Eleanor. The ranch equipment came next, that ancient tractor Eleanor knew so well. The restoration manual she'd given him had a receipt tucked inside, dated 2 years ago, long before their marriage. The shop owner's name was circled in Eleanor's distinctive handwriting. "Hey, Pete," Jake called out later that day, catching the old ranch hand between tasks. "How long have we had that new irrigation pump in the south field?" Pete scratched his head. "The one that showed up mysterious like last spring? Right after that big storm took out the old one?" "What do you mean, showed up?" "Well, delivery truck brought it, said it was already paid for, some kind of agricultural support program. Damn good timing, if you ask me." Jake checked the ranch. Accounts. No record of the pump, but he found something else. Small deposits, regular as clockwork, from another obscure foundation. Harrison Heritage Agricultural Fund. They'd started right after Sarah's mother died. Always just enough to cover that month's most urgent need. The evidence mounted. Sarah's art supplies, specially modified for her condition, had been arriving anonymously for months before the marriage. The weighted brushes Eleanor suggested were identical to ones that had appeared on their doorstep last Christmas. Their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Martinez, who'd kept them supplied with groceries during the worst times. Jake found a photo of her accepting a community service award presented by Eleanor Blackwood's charitable foundation. Even Sarah's favorite teacher, Mrs. Collins, had received special training in working with students with movement disorders. The program was funded by, Jake's heart jumped, the MB Legacy Trust. He discovered more photographs in Eleanor's study while she was away. Hidden behind the business albums was the one she'd taken from him earlier. It wasn't just family history, it was his family's history. Pictures of the ranch through the years, his parents at community events, even baby pictures of him, and later, Sarah. One photo stopped him cold. His mother in a hospital bed, looking frail but smiling, holding his newborn daughter, and there, partially visible at the edge of the frame, a familiar silver-haired figure. The final piece fell into place when he found the letter. It was tucked into an old book of ranch records, his mother's handwriting still clear after all these years. "Dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're keeping your promise. Watch over my boys, Jake and the ranch both. They're stubborn as Texas mules, but worth every bit of trouble, and if grandchildren come along, well, you know what to do. You always have. All my love, Mary Beth. Jake sat back in Eleanor's office chair, mind reeling. Every crisis averted, every mysterious solution, every bit of help that had appeared just when they needed it most. It hadn't been luck. It had been Eleanor, keeping a promise to his mother, watching over them from afar for years. But why? What connected this wealthy oil baroness to his mother so deeply that she'd spent years as their secret guardian angel? And why choose marriage now, after all this time in the shadows? The sound of Eleanor's car pulling up the drive broke through his thoughts. Time for answers. This time, she wouldn't be able to dodge his questions with a convenient business trip. This time, he wanted the whole truth. Mike Chen had been Jake's classmate in high school before becoming a private investigator. When Jake called asking for help, he agreed to meet at a diner 30 miles from the ranch, where Eleanor's influence didn't reach. "Let me get this straight," Mike said, spreading out the documents Jake had brought. "Your new wife has been secretly funding your ranch and your daughter's medical care for years before you met her, through shell companies and secret trusts. And she knew my mother somehow." Jake pushed his coffee cup aside. "I need to know how deep this goes, Mike. I need to understand why." Mike's fingers flew over his laptop keyboard. Eleanor Blackwood, born Eleanor Grace Montgomery. Father was indeed a mechanic-turned-oil man. Mother died young. No siblings. He paused, frowning at the screen. "Interesting. She attended the same boarding school as your mother." "What?" "Mary Beth Sullivan and Eleanor Montgomery, class of 72, both scholarship students." Mike turned the laptop, showing a yearbook photo. Two teenage girls, arm in arm, laughing at the camera. They were roommates. Jake stared at his mother's young face, at the way she leaned against Eleanor with the easy comfort of deep friendship. She never mentioned, "There's more." Mike pulled up financial records. The MB Legacy Trust was established 30 years ago, but it wasn't Eleanor's money initially. The seed funding came from your mother's life insurance policy. "That's impossible." Dad said there was no policy. "There was. Your mother arranged it secretly, with Eleanor as trustee. The initial amount was modest, but Eleanor's investments multiplied it many times over." Mike's expression softened. "She's been managing your mother's legacy all these years, using it to protect your family." The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed. Overhead, as Jake processed this, the ranch equipment, Sarah's medical care, all technically paid for with your mother's money, grown through Eleanor's financial expertise. But the amounts involved. Mike shook his head. "Eleanor's been matching every dollar from the trust with at least 10 of her own. The total support over the years, it's in the millions." Jake's hands trembled as he sorted through the papers. Anonymous donations to Sarah's doctors for research, educational grants to her teachers. Even the local grocery store had received community support funding to ensure they could extend credit to certain families. "She created a safety net," Mike said quietly, "one so subtle you'd never notice unless you went looking. Every time things got tough, help appeared that seemed just lucky enough to be believable. But why marry me now? Why not just keep helping from the shadows?" Mike pulled up another document. "Remember that oil company trying to buy up local ranches? They were planning hostile takeovers of properties that refused to sell, including yours." He tapped the screen. "Eleanor's marriage to you protected the ranch in a way no amount of anonymous support could. She made it legally part of Blackwood Enterprises. So it was just business after all," Jake said, his throat tight. "No," Mike's voice was firm. "Look, at the timing, she could have bought the rival company, or crushed them a dozen other ways. She chose marriage, right when Sarah's condition was worsening, right when you were most vulnerable." He gathered the papers carefully. "I think she was tired of watching from a distance. Your mother's letter asked her to watch over you, but I think she wanted to do more than watch." Jake remembered Eleanor teaching Sarah to hold her paintbrush, the gentle way she handled his daughter's bad days, the look in her eyes when she talked about family legacy. "There's one more thing." Mike hesitated. The experimental treatment Sarah's receiving. It exists because Eleanor funded the research years ago. When Sarah first got sick, she didn't just find the treatment. She made sure it would be there when Sarah needed it. The diner had emptied around them as the afternoon stretched on. Through the window, Jake could see storm clouds gathering over the distant ranch lands. "What are you going to do?" Mike asked. Jake gathered the evidence of Eleanor's years of silent support, of a promise kept to his mother, of a love that had expressed itself through quiet protection and careful planning. "I'm going to go home," he said, "and I'm going to ask my wife to tell me about her best friend from boarding school." Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, and Jake thought about storms weathered and shelter given, about guardians both seen and unseen, and about how love sometimes worked in ways you'd never expect. Eleanor was in her study when Jake returned, a familiar photograph in her hands, the one of her and Mary Beth in their school uniforms. She didn't seem surprised to see him, or by the stack of documents he carried. "I wondered when you'd start looking deeper," she said softly. "You have your mother's persistence." "Tell me about her," Jake said, taking the chair across from her desk. "Tell me everything." Eleanor traced the edge of the photograph with one finger. "We were both scholarship students. Your mother was the daughter of a ranch hand. I was a mechanic's daughter. The rich girls didn't know what to make of us, so we made something of ourselves instead." She opened a drawer and pulled out an old newspaper clipping. His parents' wedding announcement. "Mary Beth was the smartest person I'd ever met, but she fell in love with ranching and your father. I fell in love with the oil business. Different paths, same determination. You were at their wedding. Maid of honor." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Though the photo barely shows me. I was already learning to stay in the background even then." Jake spread out the evidence he'd gathered. The trust, the anonymous help, all these years. Mary Beth knew she was sick long before she told anyone. Eleanor's voice caught slightly. "Cancer, the same kind that took her mother. She made me promise to watch over her family if anything happened." She met Jake's eyes. "I never break a promise to those I love." "But why stay hidden? Why not tell us? Your father was a proud man. He wouldn't have accepted help even after Mary Beth passed. And you—" She shook her head. "You're just like him, just like her. Too stubborn to accept charity, too determined to do everything yourself. So you created the trust, made it look like luck, like coincidence. The money was Mary Beth's idea. She took out that life insurance policy in secret, made me trustee. Make it grow, she told me. Use it to keep them safe. So I did." Eleanor's composure cracked slightly. "I turned her small investment into something that could help her family. Every time I succeeded in business, I thought of how it meant more resources for you and Sarah. Sarah's treatment. I couldn't save Mary Beth, but I could make sure her granddaughter had every possible chance." Eleanor's voice strengthened. "When I heard about Sarah's condition, I started funding research. Immediately. Every promising doctor, every new treatment approach, I made sure they had what they needed. Why marry me now? After all these years?" Eleanor stood, moving to the window. "Because watching from a distance wasn't enough anymore. Because Sarah needed more than anonymous help. Because that oil company was coming for the ranch, and I promised Mary Beth it would stay in the family." She turned back to him. "And because I've loved you all from afar for so long, I wanted a chance to love you up close." She pulled out an old envelope, yellowed with age. "Your mother's last letter to me. She wrote it a week before she died." Eleanor handed it to Jake. "She knew you'd figure it out eventually. When Jake understands," she wrote, "tell him I chose you to watch over them because you love as fiercely as you fight, and that kind of love is worth more than any fortune." Jake's vision blurred as he read his mother's familiar handwriting. When he looked up, Eleanor was watching him, with Mary Beth's own determination in her eyes. "I won't apologize for protecting you all these years," she said quietly, "but I will apologize for not trusting you with the truth sooner." Outside, the storm had passed. Sunlight broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the study floor. In that moment, Jake saw Eleanor not as the wealthy oil baroness or the mysterious benefactor, but as the young girl in the photograph, his mother's chosen protector, the keeper of her dearest legacy. Mom always said, "The best gifts come from love," he said finally. Guess she was right about that too. Eleanor's smile was like watching the sun break through clouds. She usually was. The days following Eleanor's revelation brought a strange tension to the ranch house. Jake found himself watching her differently, not with suspicion anymore, but with a new awareness. Every small gesture, every interaction with Sarah now carried the weight of years of hidden care. He found her one morning in the kitchen, preparing Sarah's medication with the same precise attention she gave to oil contracts. The morning sun caught her silver hair, and for a moment he saw her as his mother must have, the fiercely loyal friend who would move mountains in secret to keep a promise. "You could have told me," he said quietly, making her turn. "All those times we were struggling, drowning in bills. You were right there." Eleanor measured the medicine carefully before responding. "Would you have accepted my help if I had?" "No," he admitted. "But that's not the point, isn't it?" She set the medicine aside, facing him fully. "Your mother knew you, Jake. Knew you'd inherit the Harrison pride along with the ranch. She made me promise not just to help, but to help in a way you could accept. By deceiving me, by respecting your dignity." Eleanor's voice was firm. "Every bit of help was structured as an opportunity you earned, not charity you received. The ranch equipment, legitimate agricultural grants, Sarah's medical care, research funding that made treatments available to all qualified patients. You still had to work, to struggle, to succeed on your own merits. And our marriage," the question that had been burning in his mind. "Was that just another way to help without hurting my pride?" Something flickered in Eleanor's eyes. "I told you the practical reasons. The rival oil company, Sarah's medical needs, the ranch's future." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But there was another reason. One your mother would have understood." "What?" "Loneliness." The word hung in the air between them. "I spent 20 years watching your family from a distance. Seeing Sarah grow up in photographs, watching you fight every battle alone. I was tired of being the unseen guardian angel. I wanted—" She stopped, composing herself. "I wanted to be part of the family I'd been protecting for so long." The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows, warming the silence that followed. From upstairs came the sound of Sarah getting ready for the day, humming a tune Eleanor had taught her. "When Sarah was born," Eleanor continued softly, "Mary, Beth's trust fund had grown enough to cover any normal childhood expenses. But when she got sick," Eleanor's hands gripped the counter, "I couldn't just watch and wait, not again, not like with Mary Beth. So you funded the research directly. Every promising lead, every specialist. I would have spent my entire fortune if that's what it took." She met his eyes, "Not because of a promise to your mother, but because that little girl became my heart's treasure long before I had any right to claim her." Jake thought of all the small ways Eleanor had shown. Her love for Sarah, the modified art supplies, the gentle patience on bad days, the fierce determination to fund treatments. None of that had been about obligation. "And me?" he asked, voice rough. "Where do I fit in this?" Eleanor's smile held a hint of Mary Beth's directness. "You're the stubborn rancher who won my respect before he had my help. The man who would sacrifice everything for his daughter. The son Mary Beth would be proud of." She hesitated. "And if you'll let me, I'd like to be more than just your mother's friend or Sarah's protector. I'd like us to build something real from this arrangement." "Something real," Jake repeated. "No more secrets?" "No more secrets." She reached into her robe pocket and pulled out a small key. "This opens a safe in my study. Everything is there. Every letter from Mary Beth, every record of help given, every photo I collected over the years. Your family's history intertwined with mine. She held out the key. It's time you had access to all of it. Jake looked at the key, thinking of his mother's last letter. You love as fiercely as you fight, she'd written to Eleanor, looking at his wife now. This complex woman who'd shaped his family's destiny from the shadows. He finally understood what his mother had seen in her all those years ago. He took the key, but caught Eleanor's hand before she could withdraw it. Thank you, he said quietly, for everything, even the deception. Her fingers tightened on his briefly. Mary Beth always said love finds its own way. She'd be laughing at us now, taking such a complicated path to something so simple. And what's that? Eleanor's eyes met his, warm with understanding. Family, Jake? In the end, it's all about family. The safe in Eleanor's study contained more than just documents. As Jake went through it that evening, with Eleanor sitting quietly nearby, he found pieces of his life he'd thought lost forever. His mother's charm bracelet, missing since her death. His first-grade report card, a lock of Sarah's baby hair. I didn't steal them, Eleanor said softly, seeing his expression. Mary Beth gave me these things to keep safe. She knew her time was growing short, and she wanted certain things preserved. The photo albums told a story of quiet vigilance. School plays watched from the back row, ranch auctions where mysterious bidders helped drive up prices for their cattle. Sarah's dance recitals, a silver-haired figure barely visible in the shadows. You were always there, Jake murmured, as close as I dared. Eleanor touched a photo of Sarah's 5th birthday party. That was the hardest, staying hidden. When I wanted to celebrate with her, to tell her how proud her grandmother would have been. Sarah found them there, surrounded by memories. What are you looking at? They shared a glance and Jake nodded. Eleanor patted the sofa beside her. Come here, sweetheart. I want to tell you about your grandmother Mary Beth and how she made... Sure, you'd always have someone watching over you. Sarah settled between them as Eleanor began the story. She told of 2 scholarship girls who became sisters in all but blood, of promises made and kept, of love that worked in silence for years. Jake watched his daughter's face as understanding dawned. So you're not just my new mum, Sarah said, slowly. You've been my guardian angel all along. Eleanor's composure cracked. Oh, my darling girl. I've loved you since before you were born. Sarah's arms went around Eleanor's neck. Is that why you knew about the weighted paintbrushes? And my favorite colors? And how to make the tremors feel better? I paid attention, Eleanor whispered. Every detail, every need, every dream. Just like your grandmother would have. Jake watched them, these 2 pieces of his heart, and felt something shift inside him. The marriage of convenience, the business arrangement, all of it fell away, leaving something far more precious in its place. Later that night, after Sarah was asleep, Jake found Eleanor on the porch. She was holding Mary Beth's charm bracelet, moonlight catching on the silver. I've been thinking, he said, sitting beside her, about what you said, building something real. Eleanor's hands stilled on the bracelet. Yes, my mother chose well, he said quietly. Not just a protector for her family, but maybe the perfect partner for her son. Even if it took us a strange path to get here. She turned to him, hope and hesitation mingling in her expression. Jake, you've loved us from a distance for so long, he continued. Maybe it's time we all learned to love up close. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. Eleanor's hand found his, warm and sure. I'd like that, she said softly. Very much. In Sarah's room, the latest scan results lay on her bedside table, showing improvement beyond the doctor's expectations. On the wall, a new painting hung beside her old ones, 3 figures together on the ranch, rendered in confident strokes, made possible by weighted brushes and a grandmother's loving foresight. The past and present merged in that quiet moment. Somewhere, Jake thought, his mother was smiling at how her final gift to her family had blossomed into something even she might not have imagined. Mary Beth always said love finds its own way, Eleanor murmured, echoing their earlier conversation. Jake squeezed her hand gently. She also said, "You love as fiercely as you fight." I'm beginning to understand what she meant. Under the Texas stars, they sat together, no longer guardian and ward, no longer bound by just duty and old promises, but by something new and precious growing between them. Something real. Spring came to the ranch with a riot of wildflowers and new beginnings. Eleanor's business acumen merged seamlessly with Jake's ranching expertise, transforming the Heiress ranch into something that honored both past and future. They started with the garden. Eleanor had discovered Mary Beth's old planting journals in the safe, detailed notes about what grew best in each patch of soil. "Your mother was quite the botanist," Eleanor said one morning, as they worked the soil together. She could read the land like most people read books. Jake watched Eleanor's sure hands planting seedlings, her expensive gardening clothes smudged with honest dirt. "You're not so bad at it yourself. Mary Beth taught me. Said every oil well starts with understanding what's beneath the surface." She smiled, remembering. "We used to joke that I took that lesson a bit too literally." Sarah joined them, her movements stronger now, more confident. The latest treatments were working better than anyone had hoped. She carried her own small watering can, carefully tending the rows they'd planted. "Grandma really wrote all this down?" Sarah asked, peering at the journal's faded pages. "She wrote down everything." Eleanor helped Sarah measure the space between plantings. She believed knowledge should be passed down, just like land. The garden became their morning ritual. Jake found himself rising earlier, looking forward to these quiet moments when the three of them worked together, creating something new from his mother's old wisdom and Eleanor's careful planning. Other changes came naturally. Eleanor's separate bedroom gradually filled with shared memories. Sarah's artwork, Jake's mother's quilt, photographs, old and new, mingling on the walls. One evening, Jake simply moved his things in, and neither of them mentioned it. It felt right. The ranch hands noticed the shift. Old Pete commented on it during a fence repair, Eleanor holding the posts steady while Jake worked the wire. "Never seen the ranch running so smooth," he said. "Reminds me of when your parents were working it together, Jake. Same kind of rhythm to it." Eleanor had blushed at that, a sight Jake was learning to treasure. His strong, capable wife still startled at these small acknowledgments of her place in their world. They were reviewing ranch accounts one night when Jake noticed something. Eleanor had been systematically transferring her personal holdings into the family trust. "You don't have to do this," he said, gesturing at the papers. "I want to." She met his eyes steadily. "Mary Beth gave me her trust to protect her family. Now you and Sarah are my family too. Everything I have should reflect that." Jake reached across the desk, taking her hand. The gold band on her finger caught the lamplight. "When did you fall in love with us?" Eleanor's breath caught slightly. It was the first time either of them had used that word. "With Sarah?" "The moment I saw her first ultrasound photo. Your mother was so excited to be a grandmother." She squeezed his hand. "With you, watching you fight for this ranch, for your daughter, never giving up. How could I not? And now I get to love you both up close." Her smile was soft. "It's better than I ever imagined." That weekend, they hosted a barbecue for the ranch hands and their families. Sarah proudly showed off the garden, explaining which plants came from her grandmother's journal. Eleanor worked the grill like she'd done it all her life, trading easy banter with the cowboys. Jake watched them all, his daughter growing stronger every day, his wife finally comfortable in the role she'd prepared for in secret for so long. Their extended ranch family coming together under the Texas sky. Later, as the sun set and Sarah fell asleep between them on the porch swing, Eleanor hummed Mary Beth's favorite hymn. Jake listened to the familiar tune, thinking how love could echo through generations, finding new ways to express itself. "Thank you," he said softly, "for loving us from afar all those years, and even more, for loving us up close now." Eleanor's answer was to lean her head against his shoulder, their daughter peaceful between them, the garden they'd planted together blooming in the dying light. The call came during a routine board meeting. Eleanor was presenting quarterly projections when her private line rang, the one only family used. Jake's voice was tight with controlled panic. Sarah collapsed at school. We're heading to Memorial. Eleanor was moving before he finished speaking. I'm on my way. And Jake, call Dr. Matthews. I'll have her waiting for us. The next hours blurred together in the sterile hospital corridors. Sarah's condition, stable for months, had taken an unexpected turn. Her body was rejecting the latest treatment protocol. The tremors are worse, Dr. Matthews explained, her face grave. But I'm more concerned about the inflammatory response. Her system is fighting against itself. Jake paced the waiting room while Eleanor worked her phone, calling in favors from medical researchers across the country. She'd spent years building these connections, preparing for a moment she'd prayed would never come. There's an experimental treatment, Dr. Matthews said finally. It's still in early trials, but what are the risks? Jake asked. It's aggressive. The side effects, the doctor hesitated. Tell us everything, Eleanor said, her hand finding Jake's. The procedure would require Sarah's immune system to be almost completely suppressed before introducing the new treatment. The danger of infection would be extreme. The success rate was promising, but not guaranteed. How long do we have to decide? Jake's voice was rough. Her condition is deteriorating rapidly. If we're going to try this, it needs to be within the next 12 hours. Eleanor felt Jake's hand tighten on hers. In that moment, she wasn't the wealthy oil baroness or the secret guardian. She was simply a mother, terrified for her child. I can't make this decision, Jake whispered when the doctor left. If something goes wrong, Eleanor led him to Sarah's room. Their daughter lay small and pale against the white sheets, her usually active hands eerily still. On the bedside table, her latest artwork sat unfinished, a family portrait showing all three of them in front of the ranch house. Look at me, Eleanor said softly. Do you know why Mary Beth chose me as your guardian? Jake shook his head. Because I understand. Calculated risks, every oil well, every business deal, it's all about weighing the odds and having the courage to act. She touched Sarah's cheek gently. Your mother knew there would be moments like this, moments when love alone isn't enough, when you need someone who can fight with both heart and head. What would you do? I'd fight. With everything I have, every resource, every connection. Her voice strengthened. I didn't spend years protecting her from afar, just to lose her now that I can hold her close. Jake looked at their daughter, then back at Eleanor. In her eyes, he saw the same fierce determination that had driven her to watch over them all those years. Okay, he said, make the calls. Eleanor's response was immediate. Within hours, the hospital's top infectious disease team was briefed and ready. A sterile containment room was prepared. Specialists flew in from 3 states. I've arranged for us to stay here throughout the treatment, Eleanor told Jake, as they watched the medical team prep Sarah for the procedure. There's a private suite connected to her room. Jake nodded, his throat too tight for words. The next days were a testament to love's endurance. They took shifts at Sarah's bedside, talking to her through surgical masks, wearing sterile gowns that couldn't hide their fear or hope. Eleanor handled the medical teams and administrative details, letting Jake focus solely on Sarah. But at night, in their private suite, she let herself break down in his arms. I can't lose her, she whispered. Against his chest. I can't fail Mary Beth, fail you, fail her. Hey, Jake's voice was gentle. You haven't failed anyone. You're the reason we have this chance at all. On the 5th day, Sarah's fever broke. By the 7th, her hands were steady enough to hold a pencil. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. The new protocol is working better than we hoped, Dr. Matthews reported. Her body's accepting the treatment. The latest scans show significant improvement. They stood together at Sarah's bedside, watching her sleep peacefully for the first time in days. The monitors beeped steadily, each sound a quiet victory. Thank you, Jake said quietly, for being here, for knowing what to do, for loving her. Enough to move mountains. Eleanor leaned against him, exhausted but grateful. That's what mothers do. It was the first time she'd called herself that out loud. Jake's arm tightened around her waist, and they both knew something fundamental had shifted. They weren't just a family of convenience anymore. They were a family forged in crisis, tested by fear, and strengthened by love. Sarah stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Mom? Dad?" They moved as one to her bedside, their hands linking naturally. Over their daughters. Sarah's recovery transformed their family in ways none of them had expected. The private hospital suite became a temporary home, where pretenses fell away and truth emerged in quiet moments. Eleanor maintained her commanding presence with doctors and administrators, but Jake noticed how her hand trembled when signing medical forms, how she pressed her fingers to Mary Beth's old charm bracelet during tense moments. His strong, capable wife carried fear and hope in equal measure. One evening, after Sarah had finally been cleared to eat real food, Jake found Eleanor in the suite's small kitchen, methodically crushing pills into applesauce, just as she had done at home. "The nurses could do that," he said softly. "I need to do it." She didn't look up. "I need to do something besides make calls and write checks." Jake moved behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. She stilled under his touch. "You know what Sarah said to me today?" he asked. "She said she wasn't scared during the worst of it because she knew her mom was handling everything." Eleanor's breath caught. "She called me Mom?" "She did." Jake turned her gently to face him. "And she's right. You're not just making calls and writing checks. You're being a mother." Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks. "I've wanted to be her mother for so long, to hold her, comfort her, not just watch from a distance." She wiped her eyes with familiar composure. "I never thought it would happen like this. Life rarely happens the way we expect." Jake brushed a tear from her cheek. "When I agreed to this marriage, I thought I was accepting a business arrangement. Instead, I found—" He paused, gathering courage. "I found love." Eleanor's eyes widened. It was the first time he'd said it directly. "I love you," he continued. "Not for the help you've given us, not for the promises you kept to my mother, but for who you are, how you love Sarah, how you fight for this family, how you've turned a marriage of convenience into something real and precious." "Jake," her voice wavered, "you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know." Of course I love you." The words rushed out like a dam breaking. "I've loved you since I watched you take on the world alone, rather than compromise your principles. I've loved Sarah since before she was born. I've loved this family from afar for so long, and now," she gripped his shirt, "now that I can love you up close, it overwhelms me sometimes." The hospital suite's harsh lighting softened somehow as Jake pulled her close. Their first real kiss tasted of tears and truth and possibilities. A small gasp from the doorway made them turn. Sarah stood there in her robe, steadier on her feet than she'd been in days. "Finally," she said, grinning. "I was wondering when you two would figure it out." Eleanor laughed through her tears, opening her arms. Sarah walked into them without hesitation, and Jake enfolded them both. "How long have you known?" Jake asked his daughter. "Since the garden," Sarah said. "Real people in love look at each other the way you two do, when you think nobody's watching." Eleanor pressed a kiss to Sarah's head. "When did you get so wise?" "Must be those good genes from Grandma Mary Beth." Sarah's smile turned mischievous. "Plus, I had a guardian angel watching over me all these years, teaching me to pay attention to the important things." Later that night, with Sarah sleeping peacefully in her hospital bed, Jake and Eleanor sat together in the window alcove. The city lights spread out below them, but their focus was on the simple family portrait Sarah had finished that afternoon. 3 figures, drawn with steady hands, standing together in front of the ranch house. "Mary Beth would be proud," Eleanor said softly. "Not just of Sarah's recovery, but of how her family has grown." Jake took her hand, running his thumb over the gold band that meant so much more now than when he'd first put it on. "She knew what she was doing, asking you to watch over us. She gave us time to find our way to each other. A rather unconventional path." Eleanor noted. "The best love stories usually are." Jake pulled her closer. "Thank you for waiting for us to be ready, for loving us from afar until we could love you back up close." Eleanor's answer was to kiss him again, there in the quiet hospital night, as their daughter slept safely nearby and the stars wheeled overhead, witnesses to a love that had finally found its way home. The adoption papers sat on Eleanor's desk for 3 days before she found the courage to bring them up. She'd had them drawn up weeks ago, after Sarah's recovery stabilized, but making something official felt different than the natural bonds they'd formed. "What's that you keep looking at?" Sarah asked one afternoon, finding Eleanor in her study. The girl's health had improved remarkably. She now moved with an ease that brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. Eleanor took a deep breath. "Something I'd like to discuss with you and your father, together." Jake joined them, and Eleanor placed the papers on her desk. "I know we're already a family," she began carefully, "but I thought, if you both want, we could make it official." Sarah picked up the papers, her eyes widening. "You want to adopt me?" "Only if you want it, sweetheart. You already have a mother who loved you very much, and I would never try to replace her. But I could have 2 moms." Sarah looked between Eleanor and Jake. "One watching from heaven and one here with us?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "That's a beautiful way to think of it." Jake picked up the papers, scanning them with misty eyes. "You've included Mary Beth's name. The official documents will read, Sarah Elizabeth Harrison Blackwood, daughter of Jake Harrison, Mary Beth Harrison, and Eleanor Blackwood. I thought she should always be acknowledged." Sarah launched herself into Eleanor's arms. "Yes, I want it official. I want everyone to know you're my mum too." Jake watched them, remembering Eleanor's years of secret guardianship. "You've been her mother in every way that matters for so long. This just puts it on paper." The signing ceremony at the courthouse was intimate, but meaningful. Dr. Matthews came, along with old Pete and the core ranch hands who'd become family. Eleanor had arranged for a photographer to capture everything, knowing these pictures would join the countless others she'd collected over the years. "Do you, Eleanor Blackwood, understand the responsibilities and commitments of adopting Sarah Elizabeth Harrison?" the judge asked. Eleanor's voice was clear and strong. "I've loved her since before she was born. I'll love her for the rest of my life." The judge smiled at the unusual response. "I'll take that as a yes." As they signed the papers, Sarah held both Jake and Eleanor's free hands. 3 signatures transformed years of silent love into legal bonds, making official what their hearts had known for months. Outside the courthouse, Sarah hugged Eleanor tight. "Can we go to the ranch now? I want to put my new pictures up in the garden." Eleanor looked questioningly at Jake. "Sarah and I have been working on something," he explained. "A surprise." They drove home to find the garden transformed. New plants surrounded a beautiful stone bench, and above it a hand-painted sign read, "Mary Beth's Garden, where love grows through generations." "Pete helped us install it," Sarah explained proudly, "and I painted the sign with steady hands." Eleanor traced the letters of her old friend's name. "It's perfect." "There's more," Jake said softly. He led them to a newly created corner of the garden, where 3 rose bushes grew. Simple plaques marked each one. Mary Beth's legacy, Eleanor's promise, and in the middle, Sarah's strength. "The roses are from cuttings of your mother's original bushes," Jake told Eleanor. "Pete remembered you mentioning once that you and Mary Beth learned gardening together at school." Eleanor knelt by the roses, touching the familiar leaves. "You remembered that?" "I remember everything you tell me now," Jake said. "No more secrets, no more distance." Sarah placed her latest family portrait on the bench, the one she'd drawn in the hospital, now framed and protected from the elements. In it, 3 figures stood together, their love evident in every carefully drawn line. "Look," she said, pointing to the sky she'd painted. "I put 2 suns, one for Grandma Mary Beth watching from heaven, and one for our family here." Eleanor pulled her daughter close, reaching for Jake's hand. Here in Mary Beth's garden, surrounded by symbols of their past and present, their family felt complete. in a way that went beyond blood or law. "Your grandmother once told me," Eleanor said softly, "that love planted in good soil would always bloom. I didn't fully understand what she meant until now." Jake squeezed her hand. "She gave us the best soil possible, truth, trust, and time to grow together." Sarah leaned against them both, her movements strong and sure. Above them, two suns seemed to shine, the real one in the Texas sky and the one in Sarah's portrait, where a mother's love watched over her family from above, while another's love held them close below. 1 year after the adoption, the Harrison Blackwood Ranch hosted its first major celebration. The occasion was threefold: Sarah's clean bill of health, the ranch's most profitable year in its history, and what they now called their family anniversary. The transformation of the property was evident everywhere. Modern equipment worked, alongside carefully preserved antiques. The historic barn gleamed with fresh paint, while solar panels on the roof powered state-of-the-art monitoring systems. Like their family, the ranch had found its balance between honoring the past and embracing the future. Eleanor stood in her kitchen, their kitchen now, filled with both her business papers and Jake's ranch records, watching Sarah direct the caterers with a confidence that still amazed her. Her daughter's hands were steady as she arranged flowers from Mary Beth's garden in elegant vases. "Mom," Sarah called out, "should we put the family photos in the study or the main room?" The word "mom" still made Eleanor's heart skip. "The main room, sweetheart. Today's about family, after all." Jake came in from his morning rounds, pressing a kiss to Eleanor's temple before snagging a pastry. The gesture was casual, natural, one of countless small moments that showed how far they'd come from their cautious beginning. "The new irrigation system is working perfectly," he reported. "Old Pete says we might have the best harvest in decades." "Speaking of Pete," Eleanor said, "he finally agreed to accept the retirement package, though he insists on keeping his cottage and advisory position." Jake grinned. "Knew you'd wear him down eventually. You're as stubborn as he is." "Must be why we all get along so well," Sarah quipped, making them both laugh. The party brought together everyone who'd been part of their journey. Dr. Matthews arrived with news that Sarah's treatment protocol was being approved for wider use, thanks to the research foundation Eleanor had established. The ranch hands and their families mingled with Eleanor's business associates, all barriers broken down by good food and better company. Mrs. Martinez, who'd once secretly delivered groceries on Eleanor's behalf, now ran the ranch's new community outreach program. "Who would have thought," she said, hugging Eleanor, "that all our little secrets would lead to something so beautiful?" The highlight of the celebration was the unveiling of a new portrait in the main room. Unlike the formal oil paintings common in Eleanor's business world, this was Sarah's artwork, a large canvas showing their family in front of the ranch house. She'd captured Jake's quiet strength, Eleanor's elegant grace, and her own vibrant spirit with remarkable skill. "I painted it with Grandma Mary Beth's brushes," Sarah announced proudly, "the ones Mom found in the old ranch office." Eleanor touched the frame gently. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you, sweetheart. Of all of us." As evening approached, guests gathered in Mary Beth's garden. The 3 rose bushes had flourished, their blooms filling the air with sweet fragrance. Jake stood at the garden's entrance, addressing their friends and family. "A year ago we became official on paper," he said, his arm around Eleanor. "But our real story started long before that, with a promise between 2 friends. A promise that love would watch over this family," Eleanor continued, her voice steady despite her emotions. "Mary Beth chose me to be her family's guardian angel. What she couldn't have known was that in protecting them, I would find my own family, my own home." Sarah stepped forward, holding something covered in velvet, "which is why we wanted to add something to the garden." She unveiled a small bronze plaque set into the garden wall. It read, "Love takes many forms, the love that watches from above, the love that guards from afar, and the love that holds us close. In memory of Mary Beth Harrison, who gave our family all 3. Eleanor's careful composure broke. Jake held her close as Sarah wrapped her arms around them both. Around them, their extended family, ranch hands, doctors, neighbors, friends, watched with understanding smiles and misty eyes. Later, after the guests had gone and night settled over the ranch, the three of them sat on the garden bench. Sarah's head rested on Eleanor's shoulder while Jake held them both. Above them, stars sparkled in the Texas sky like diamonds scattered on velvet. "Do you think Grandma Mary Beth knew?" Sarah asked softly. "That when she asked you to watch over us, you'd become our family?" Eleanor touched Mary Beth's charm bracelet, now worn smooth by years of worried touches. "I think she knew love would find its way. She was always wiser than the rest of us." Jake kissed his wife's temple. "Smart woman, my mother. She gave us the greatest gift of all." "What's that?" Sarah asked. Eleanor smiled, looking at her family, the one she'd watched over for so long and could now hold close forever. "Time," she said softly. "Time to let love grow in its own way." The idea was born on a quiet evening in Mary Beth's garden, as Eleanor helped Sarah with her college applications. At 17, their daughter had grown into a remarkable young woman, her artwork now displayed in galleries across Texas. Her latest series, Guardian Angels, told their family's story through abstract paintings that captured both absence and presence, distance and closeness. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, looking up from her essay, "about all the other families out there, the ones who need guardian angels but don't have them." Eleanor set down her tablet, where she'd been reviewing oil company reports. "What do you mean, sweetheart? Like us, before you came close, there must be other ranching families struggling, other kids who need medical treatment. What if we could help them?" Jake, who'd been listening from his favorite spot on the garden bench, leaned forward. "What are you suggesting?" Sarah's eyes lit up with her mother's determination. "The Mary Beth Legacy Foundation. Not just the trust anymore, but something bigger. Something that could watch over other families the way Mom watched over us." Eleanor and Jake exchanged glances, seeing Mary Beth's wisdom shining through their daughter's eyes. The foundation launched 6 months later. Its mission was simple but powerful: to preserve ranching heritage while supporting families facing medical challenges. Eleanor's business acumen combined with Jake's ranching knowledge created a program that offered both practical help and dignity to those receiving it. They started with the Martinez family down the road. Their youngest son had been diagnosed with a rare condition similar to Sarah's early symptoms. The foundation connected them with Dr. Matthews, provided treatment funding, and offered agricultural grants to keep their small ranch operating. "Just like you did for us," Jake said softly, watching Eleanor review applications one evening. "But this time, these families know their guardian angels." The foundation grew rapidly. Eleanor's oil business contacts provided funding, while ranch families offered practical support and understanding. Sarah's art therapy program became a cornerstone, helping children cope with chronic conditions through creative expression. Old Pete, in his advisory capacity, mentored young ranchers in combining traditional methods with sustainable practices. The Heiress Blackwood Ranch became a model of how to preserve heritage while embracing progress. On the foundation's first anniversary, they hosted a gathering of recipient families. Children played in Mary Beth's garden, while parents shared stories of hope and resilience. Sarah's latest painting was unveiled in the main house, a stunning work showing countless stars lighting the way for travelers in darkness. "Guardian angels come in many forms," she explained to the gathered families. "Sometimes they're watching from heaven, sometimes they're helping from afar, and sometimes," she smiled at Eleanor, "sometimes they come close enough to hold you." Later that night, Eleanor found a letter in Mary Beth's old journal, one she'd somehow missed before. The paper was aged, but the words were clear. "My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, you've finally let yourself be seen. You've stopped watching from the shadows and stepped into the light of love. I knew you would eventually. Your heart was always too big to stay hidden forever. But here's what you might not have realized yet. Your love for my family was never meant to stop. With them, it was meant to grow, to spread, to touch others who need a guardian angel of their own. You see, I chose you not just for your strength or your resources, but for your capacity to love beyond boundaries. I knew that once you learned to love up close instead of from afar, you'd want to share that gift with others. The greatest legacies aren't in money or land or even family names. They're in the love we pass forward, the help we give without recognition, the light we shine for others finding their way home. Watch over them all, my dear friend, and know that I'm watching over you, smiling at the beautiful way love finds its path. Always, Mary Beth. Eleanor wiped tears as she finished reading. Jake and Sarah found her there, holding the letter to her heart. "Mom?" Sarah asked softly. "Are you okay?" "Perfect," Eleanor replied, pulling them both close. "Just perfect." Above them, stars twinkled in the Texas sky, countless lights in the darkness, like guardian angels watching over all who needed them. And in Mary Beth's garden, the 3 rose bushes bloomed in the moonlight. Legacy, promise, and strength, their fragrance carrying on the evening breeze, touching all who passed with the subtle perfume of love that had found its way home.